guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kat. In case you're new here, if you are, you should go ahead and subscribe to be notified when I upload new videos. Speaking of videos, this is a new one, and it is on the ABH Subculture palette. So just a disclaimer, these are all my opinions. Take everything I say with a grain of salt, as well as every other beauty influencer, anyone else who reviews this, take everything with a grain of salt. I was not sent this. I wish I was. ABH, hit me up. Bought this with my own money from Sephora. So in this video, I'm going to go over my opinions on the palette, also an overview of the palette, price, and etc., which I'll do now. Swatches. I'll put timestamps for everything in the description in case you care. If you want to see this palette in action, I will be uploading a video in a few days on a tutorial. If you guys want a tutorial on this look, tell me. If you guys have any requests, leave them down below. This palette created such an uproar in the beauty community. Some people had really terrible palettes, some people had really good palettes. There were people throwing accusations around, saying that people were lying. It was just bullshit. It was crazy. So I'm just gonna go over everything. My opinion. First off, this is $55 Canadian and $42 American. I believe Modern Ren is the same price as this. It's made in the USA. It has 0.7 grams of product per shadow, which means it has 9.8 grams of product altogether, which is the same amount as Modern Renaissance. This has a shelf life of 6 months, which isn't that long, but I think you'll be fine to have it longer. Anastasia Beverly Hills is cruelty-free, but this is not vegan. It does have carmine in it, which is a dye from beetles. Okay, so I've watched a ton of videos on this palette. There are a few people who I think are important, who I've seen videos from that I think that you should watch, and I'll be mentioning stuff that they said throughout this video, and I'll link them down below. So first, Stephanie Nicole, Samantha Ravindal, and Sarah D. Their videos will be linked down below. I have so much to say about this palette. So let's start off with advertising and marketing. How ABH marketed this palette. When they came out with this palette, they said that it's the sister to the Modern Renaissance palette. Now, I don't have the Modern Renaissance, but I do know quite a bit about it. So the idea was kind of that Modern Ren is day. It's a lot of like pinky, more light colors, and then this is night, as it has a variety of different shades. Where ABH went wrong in saying that was that people expected the same palette in the same formula. However, that's not true, so I think ABH went wrong there. I obviously can't compare them, not going to, but I think ABH went wrong when they said that they're sister palettes. I think money-wise, it was kind of a good idea, and I get where they were coming from. However, if you're going to say that Subculture is a sister palette to Modern Renaissance, people are going to expect the same formula, which I think is why there was such an uproar with this palette. Now, do I think that this palette is bad? Not at all. I actually really do enjoy this palette. I do have some problems with it, which I will go over, but all in all, I do like this palette and I would recommend it. So let's talk about the inconsistencies in this palette. Some people were getting good palettes, some people were getting bad palettes. Some people were hitting pan, some people weren't. It was a mess. I would just like to say that your batch code has nothing to do with anything. The batch code on your palette and on your box means nothing. What it means essentially is when the product was made, not necessarily the shadows, not necessarily the packaging, but when they were put together to create one, that is what that number is. It doesn't mean that your shadows came from different batches. It doesn't mean that your packaging came from different batches. They could all be from the same batch. It just means that that is the batch that the shadows got put into the actual palette and became one. That is what the batch code means. So your batch code does not matter at all when it comes to the inconsistencies in the palette. Obviously, there are inconsistencies. I don't think ABH is going to do anything, to be quite honest. I highly doubt they're going to change anything. If you want to pick it up, I would say pick it up. ABH and Sephora both have a return policy that you can return it to. Let's talk about the packaging of the palette. This is a velvet type material, which feels really nice, looks really nice, but is the worst. It gets so dirty and it's so annoying, and I don't like this type of packaging at all. It's a beautiful palette. It looks phenomenal. I love this color. I love the writing in this yellow color. I think it's gorgeous, but just this packaging kills me because I hate it. On the back of the palette, it just has a sticker with all the information about it. And then on the inside, you have a mirror. It's a decent sized mirror. I haven't really used it, but you definitely could. Then you have the shadows and you get a brush. So I don't like the brush. I tried using it today for the first time. It's not great. I mean, it's decent. I can definitely use it, but I don't really like it, and it's double-sided, which I especially don't like because I can't put it in my brush jars. So it's really annoying. I really would have preferred them to make this a one-sided brush, or even taken it out altogether and knocked a little bit of money off the price. So I'm going to talk about the shades in this palette. So there are 11 ultra mattes in this palette. There are 2 duochromes, which is electric and cube, and there is 1 metallic, which is adorn. But the duochromes and metallics don't really have a different formula, I feel like. They apply pretty much the same way. Adorn is a little more pigmented, but I still have to use Fix Plus for all 3 of them. There are 14 shades in this palette. One of them is an already existing shade, and that is Fudge. It's in a single shadow and some palettes, but the single shadow is a little different in color, so I don't know what's up with that. So I'm going to go over the swatches right now, and I'm going to talk about each shade in particular. The first shade is Cube. I really like Cube. It's super hard to get it to show up, and you have to use a ton of Fix Plus, and it photographs terribly. Next is Dawn. Dawn is probably the shadow that I've had the most problem with, as I do get a ton of kick up. Then we have Destiny. Destiny's fine. I don't love it. I don't hate it. Then we have Adorn. I really like Adorn. All-Star. I really like All-Star. Then we have Mercury, which is a gray. I feel like Mercury doesn't really fit in the palette. I don't really like the shade. I like Axis. It works very well. Roxy is a shade that a lot of people have had problems with. I personally haven't. Electric doesn't show up well for some people, but it works really well for me. I do still use Fix Plus. Then we have Fudge. That works really well. New Wave also works well. I don't love Untamed, but it definitely works well. Edge is really nice. And then we have Rowdy, which again I do like. It's a little harder to blend out. So as far as the formula goes, these are more pigments than anything. I wouldn't really say that they're shadows. I would say that they're pigments. In this formula specifically, there aren't many filler ingredients. Filler ingredient is the same as adding water to something. So if you add water to something, it is going to be watered down. It's not going to be as pigmented, but it's going to be easier to blend. That's the same with a filler ingredient in an eyeshadow. If you put a filler ingredient in it, it's going to be easier to blend, but on that first initial swatch, finger swatches, pigmentation, it's not going to be there as well. I personally like more filler in my shadows. It makes them more blendable and easier to work with. However, from a business standpoint, it makes sense to put less filler in it because on that first initial swatch, you're gonna have so much pigment right off the bat. And that's what most people look for. When they go into Sephora, they wanna see a palette and they wanna swatch it and get a ton of color. They don't wanna have next to no color. They wanna see that. And this is what happens when you don't have as much filler. So in result of this palette having less filler agents, it is harder to blend. It's not impossible, it is harder to blend. Some shades are harder than others, but they are workable. You can blend them. Another thing about this palette is that the shadows are soft pressed. Soft pressed means that you get a ton of pigmentation right off the bat. You get a ton of shadow right off the bat. And that is where the kick up and fallout comes from. There is kick up in this palette. I personally wouldn't say that it's more than any other palette that I have. If it is, just slightly, but it's nothing crazy for me personally. Keep in mind, I don't swirl my brush around. I'll get into technique in a second, but I just wanted to know on fallout, there is a lot of fallout, and especially because these colors are darker, it seems like they have more fallout, even though they don't really have much more fallout than any other shadow. It's just that they're darker colors, so you see it more. At least that's been my experience, but I would never use this palette after I do my foundation. I would always do my eyes first. Now let's talk about technique. I personally have always been very gentle with my makeup. I just do a quick little dab and blend it out softly. I'm not the type of person to just go in and like swirl my brush and then put it on my eye, and no, that's not me. So I personally haven't had to change my technique. Nothing that I do on a regular basis I have to change for this, except tapping in. I just have to tap lightly once. Normally I would tap maybe 2 times, a little harder than I would if I were using this palette, but that's an easy adjustment. I do go in circles, I do windshield wiper motions, I do all those normal techniques, and I haven't changed any of them because I go in light and I prefer to build up my color rather than just bam, put it all on and then blend it out. Another thing that I wanted to mention about the colors is that they seem to go together pretty well, but there are a few problems. So basic color theory, complementary colors are great together. However, if you mix even amounts of complementary colors together, you do result in a gray color. So that will happen when you mix colors like All-Star and Untamed. If you go in and blend too much, it even started to happen in the look that I did today. So keep that in mind when you're picking which colors you want to work with. But with that being said, it is still workable. So I think I hit just about every topic that I wanted to speak about when it comes to the Subculture palette. All in all, I do really like this palette. I think that it is very nice, and personally I find it pretty easy to work with. It's a little harder than the typical palette, but I find it easy to work with. Keep that in mind, I've been doing makeup for a while. If you're a beginner and brand new to makeup, I would not recommend this to you just because it is going to be a little harder, and if you don't understand basic color theory, it may be a little complicated for you to figure out. So yes, that is all I have to say about the Anastasia Beverly Hills Subculture palette. I do really like it. I'm very happy with my purchase. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, leave a like. Also subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!